The axe whistled through morning air, splitting oak with a sound like thunder. Kiani's massive frame bent and rose in rhythm, each swing sending chips flying across the widow's yard. Sweat gleamed bronze on shoulders that could carry a groan. Men, muscles rippling beneath skin marked with warrior scars. He'd been watching her through the kitchen window for an hour. Nalani Whitmore, still beautiful at 35 despite 3 years of widow's black. "Mister," she called from the porch, her voice carrying the refined accent of Eastern finishing schools. "I didn't hire you for this work." Kiani straightened, towering 7 feet in his worn boots. His obsidian eyes met hers across 20 yards of manicured lawn that bordered the wild Colorado territory. "Your fence posts are rotting, Mrs. Whitmore. Winter storms will flatten them." She descended the steps slowly, suspicious, in Copper Ridge. Strangers meant trouble, especially ones built like ancient gods with Apache blood running hot in their veins. Her late husband had owned half the silver mines in the territory, and vultures circled daily, though none quite like this magnificent savage hood appeared at dawn. "Asking for odd jobs. I pay for what I request," she said, stopping safely beyond arm's reach. Nothing more. Kiani drove the axe deep into the chopping block and faced her fully. "Your husband's been dead 3 winters. His foreman cheats you. Your ranch hands drink your whiskey and sleep through chores. And those soft Eastern relatives circle like coyotes waiting for you to fail." His voice carried the measured cadence of someone who chose words carefully. "You need a man who works. I need honest employment." Nalani's breath caught. How did he know about her troubles? "You've been watching me. This whole valley watches you, woman. You're the richest widow west of Denver, trying to run a ranch like a drawing room." His eyes swept over her impractical silk dress, her soft hands, her defiant chin. "But you have steel underneath that satin. I see it. How presumptuous of you two. I'll work sunup to sundown for fair wages and to meals." He continued, ignoring her protest. "I'll fix what's broken, protect what needs protecting, and ask nothing but honest employment." He paused, something raw flickering in his expression. "I might even give you the children your husband never could, if you're woman enough to want them." The words hung between them like a challenge. Nalani felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from something deeper, more dangerous. This wild man spoke of things her refined world never mentioned aloud, of needs she'd buried with her sterile, proper marriage, of desires that made her pulse race despite every rule of civilization. "You're insufferable," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Kiani smiled, a slow, knowing expression that made her knees weak. "I'm necessary, Nalani Whitmore, and you know it." That first week, Kiani worked like a man possessed. He repaired 3 miles of fence line, cleared the irrigation ditches, and caught the ranch hands selling Nalani's cattle to competitors in town. The thieves fled rather than face the Apache's quiet fury, leaving only honest workers who suddenly took their duties seriously. Nalani watched from her windows, fascinated despite herself. He moved with predatory grace, every action purposeful and efficient. When he stripped to the waist during the heat of afternoon, she found excuses to visit the garden, stealing glances at the magnificent sculpture of his torso while pretending to tend her roses. Mrs. Whitmore, her housekeeper Cordelia, fretted. "Folks in town are talking. A respectable widow shouldn't have such a man working so close to the house." "He's the most competent worker I've employed," Nalani replied coolly, though her pulse quickened whenever Kiani's eyes found hers across the yard. "His character references are impeccable." She'd written to 3 previous employers and received glowing recommendations. Kiani was honest, reliable, and possessed an almost supernatural ability with horses and cattle. What the letters didn't mention was the way he looked at her. Not with the calculating greed of other men, but with something that made her feel truly seen. For the first time, on Friday evening, she found him sitting on her porch steps, carving intricate patterns into a piece of oak. His long black hair fell loose around his shoulders, and fireflies danced in the gathering dusk. "You don't have permission to sit there," she said softly, not really meaning it. "Then tell me to leave." His hands never paused in their work. "But we both know you won't." She settled beside him, careful to maintain proper distance. "What are you making?" "Prayer stick for my grandmother's spirit. She died last spring." His voice carried old pain. "She always said I'd find my purpose in an unexpected place. And have you?" Kiani set down his knife and looked at her directly. "You tell me, Nalani, have I found my purpose?" The way he spoke her name like a caress, like a promise, made something flutter deep in her chest. "I don't know what you mean. You're lying." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and traced one finger along her cheek. You've been alone so long you've forgotten what it feels like to be truly wanted, not for your money or your dead husband's legacy, but for yourself. She should have jerked away, should have fired him immediately. Instead, she leaned into his touch like a flower seeking sunlight. This is improper. So is letting your ranch fall apart while you play at being a proper Eastern lady. His thumb brushed across her lower lip. So is pretending you don't feel this fire between us. You don't understand, she whispered. I have a reputation to maintain. Standing in the community. I can't live, can't feel. His other hand cupped her face gently. Your husband was a good man, but he never made you burn like this, did he? The truth of it struck her like lightning. Her marriage had been comfortable, respectable, passionless. She'd never experienced this wild hunger. This ache that made her want to abandon every rule she'd been taught. Stay away from me. She breathed, even as she moved closer to his warmth. If that's what you truly want, he said quietly, I'll leave tomorrow. But stop lying to yourself, Nalani. Stop pretending you don't need what I'm offering. The storm struck on Sunday night with biblical fury, turning Copper Ridge's dusty streets into rivers of mud. Nalani sat in her parlor, trying to read by lamplight while wind howled through the eaves like banshees. When lightning illuminated her windows, she glimpsed Kiani's cabin, a small structure behind the main house where he'd taken residence. Thunder crashed overhead, and suddenly her front door burst open. Kiani stood silhouetted against the storm, water streaming from his hair and clothes, his powerful frame filling the doorway. The creek's rising fast, he said without preamble. Your south pasture will flood within the hour. We need to move the cattle. Nalani rose. Practical concerns overriding propriety. In this weather, it's suicide. It's necessity. He stepped inside, leaving puddles on her Persian rug. I can't do it alone. Your ranch hands ran for town at the first rumble of thunder. She stared at him, this magnificent savage, who'd appeared in her life like an answered prayer she'd been afraid to voice. Rain had plastered his shirt to his chest, and his eyes held that familiar intensity that made her pulse race. I don't know how to work cattle in a storm. I'll teach you. He moved closer. Close enough that she could smell his masculine scent beneath the rain. But we have to go now. Nalani, every minute we delay costs you more livestock. Something in his urgency convinced her. She ran upstairs and changed into her late husband's riding clothes, emerging to find Kiani had saddled to horses and loaded supplies. They rode out into the maelstrom together, leaning low against driving rain. The cattle were panicked, milling in dangerous circles as water rose around their legs. Kiani worked like a man possessed, using voice and rope to guide the frightened animals toward higher ground. Nalani followed his lead, discovering reserves of strength she'd never known she possessed. For 3 hours they battled the storm, man and woman working as one unit against nature's fury. When lightning spooked her horse, Kiani was there instantly, his strong hand steadying both mount and rider. When exhaustion made her stumble, he caught her against his chest, his warmth cutting through the cold rain. I can't do this, she gasped during a brief lull. Yes, you can. His lips were inches from her ear, his voice rough with exertion. You're stronger than you know, woman, stronger than they ever let you believe. By dawn, they'd saved 100 head of cattle and discovered something fundamental about themselves. Nalani had found the fierce pioneer woman buried beneath years of refined education, and Kiani had found the partner he'd never dared to hope for, someone who could match his strength. With her own hidden fire, they returned to the house soaked, exhausted, and exhilarated. In the kitchen, as Nalani prepared coffee with shaking hands, Kiani came up behind her and placed his palms flat against the counter on either side of her body. Last night changed things between us, he said quietly. She leaned back against his solid warmth, abandoning pretense. Yes, I meant what I said that first day, about giving you children, about making you burn. She turned in his arms, finally, honest about what she wanted. Show me. Their first kiss was everything Nalani had dreamed and nothing she'd expected. Kiani's lips were gentle at first, questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. When she responded with desperate hunger, he deepened the kiss until she felt dizzy with want. Not here, she whispered against his mouth. Cordelia will return soon. He lifted her easily, carrying her upstairs to her bedroom, the room she'd shared with her husband, now transformed by Kiani's presence into something entirely new. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains, illuminating them both as he set her gently on her feet. Are you certain? He asked, searching her face. Once we cross this line, there's no going back to polite employment arrangements. Instead of answering, With words, Nalani began unbuttoning her shirt. His eyes followed her movements with reverent intensity, as if she were performing some sacred ritual when she stood before him in only her chemise. He drew in a sharp breath. Beautiful, he whispered. So beautiful it hurts to look at you. Their lovemaking was everything her marriage had never been: passionate, primal, transcendent. Kiyani worshipped her body with hands and mouth, awakening sensations she'd never imagined possible. When he finally claimed her completely, she cried out in wonder at the rightness of their joining. Afterward, they lay entwined in the afternoon light, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow to normal rhythm. What happens now? She asked softly. His arms tightened around her. Now we face the consequences. Your neighbors won't approve of the widow Whitmore taking an Apache lover. Let them disapprove. She traced patterns on his skin, marveling at her own boldness. I'm tired of living for other people's opinions. It won't be easy, Nalani. There will be gossip, lost friendships, business complications. Some will call you a whore for choosing desire over respectability. She raised her head to meet his eyes. And what will you be called? His smile was grim. Nothing I haven't heard before. But I'm used to being an outsider. You've lived your whole life as an insider. Are you prepared to give that up? The question hung between them like a challenge. Nalani considered all she'd worked to build: her social standing, her carefully cultivated reputation, her place in Copper Ridge's hierarchy. Then she thought of the passion they'd just shared, the partnership they'd forged during the storm, the way he made her feel alive. For this, for you. She kissed him softly. Yes, over the following weeks, they were discreet but not secretive. Kiyani continued his work, but now he often joined her for meals, sat with her on the porch in the evenings, accompanied her to town on business trips. The gossip started immediately. Nalani Whitmore's taken up with that savage. The banker's wife whispered. It's indecent, agreed the minister's daughter. She was such a refined lady. But there were other voices to women who watched with envy as Nalani blossomed under Kiyani's attention. Men who respected the Apache's obvious competence and integrity. The ranch prospered under his management, and Nalani found herself making decisions with newfound confidence. When Dr. Winthrop confirmed her suspicions 6 weeks later, she felt only joy. Pregnant, Nalani whispered, staring at her reflection in the bedroom mirror. Her hand moved instinctively to her still flat stomach, where new life was already growing. Kiyani's child, their child. She found him in the barn, tending to a mare with an injured hoof. His gentle competence with the animal made her heart swell with love and certainty about their future. Kiyani, he looked up from his work, immediately sensing the importance of the moment. What is it? I'm carrying your baby. The words hung in the dusty air between them. Kiyani went completely still, his dark eyes searching her face. Then a smile spread across his features, not the careful, controlled expressions she'd grown used to, but something wild and joyous and utterly transformed. You're certain? Dr. Winthrop confirmed it this morning. She moved closer, needing his touch. Are you pleased? Instead of answering with words, he swept her into his arms and spun her round the barn until she laughed with pure happiness. When he set her down, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. I never dared hope, he admitted. After my first wife died in childbirth, I thought the spirits had decided I wasn't meant to be a father. Nalani cupped his face in her hands. Tell me about her. Ayana, we were both 16. Married in the old way. She was carrying our son when the cavalry attacked our winter camp. His voice grew distant with old pain. I was hunting, couldn't protect them. Found their bodies 3 days later. Oh, Kiyani. Her heart broke for the young man who'd lost everything. I'm so sorry. It was 10 years ago. I thought I'd buried that dream with them. He placed his hand over her stomach with reverent care. But this child, our child, it's like being given a second chance at life itself. Their happiness was interrupted by the thunder of hooves in the courtyard. Through the barn door, they watched a dozen riders approach Nalani's brother-in-law, Cornelius Whitmore, accompanied by what looked like hired guns. Trouble, Kiyani said quietly, his body tensing for conflict. Cornelius dismounted with theatrical flourish, his city clothes and pale complexion marking him as an outsider to Colorado territory. He'd been circling for months, waiting for Nalani to fail so he could claim the ranch and mines that should have been his inheritance. Nalani, he called out, come out here this instant. They emerged from the barn together, Kiyani's protective presence giving Nalani strength. Cornelius's eyes narrowed as he took in their obvious intimacy. You disgust me, he spat. My poor brother hasn't been dead for years, and here you are, running with a savage. That's enough, Kiyani said quietly, but there was deadly promise in his voice. "I wasn't addressing you, Indian." Cornelius turned back to Nalani. "Pack your things. You're coming back to Boston where you belong. I won't have the Whitmore name associated with this perversion." Nalani stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. "This is my home, Cornelius, my ranch, my business, my choice, not when you're pregnant with a half-breed bastard." The words exploded from him like poison. "Do you think I don't have eyes? The whole territory is talking about your shame." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Cornelius's hired men looked uncomfortable with his venom, but Nalani felt only clarity, only strength flowing through her like mountain water. "This child is not a bastard," she said with quiet dignity, "because Kiani's strong heart is going to be my husband." The announcement hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Cornelius's face went purple with rage, while his hired men shifted nervously in their saddles. This wasn't the broken woman they'd expected to intimidate. "Marriage," Cornelius sputtered. "You can't be serious. No minister in the territory would perform such a ceremony. It would be an abomination." Kiani stepped forward, his powerful frame radiating controlled menace. "There are other ways to be wed, white man. Ways that matter more than your paper ceremonies. Apache rituals have no legal standing, but territorial law does." Nalani's voice cut through his protest like a blade. "Judge Mackenzie has authority to perform civil ceremonies, and unlike you, Cornelius, he believes in justice over prejudice." Cornelius's eyes glittered with malice. "You think you can just ignore society's rules? There will be consequences. No decent family will associate with you. Your business partners will abandon you. You'll be outcast. Then we'll be outcast together." Nalani replied calmly, "I'd rather live honestly as a pariah than dishonestly as a hypocrite." One of the hired guns cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Whitmore, maybe we should." "Shut up," Cornelius snapped. Then, to Nalani, "I'll contest the marriage in court, challenge your right to the property. Make your life a living hell until you come to your senses." Kiani's laugh was like winter wind through pine trees. "Try it, but remember I know this land better than any man alive. I know where bodies can disappear forever, where accidents happen to those who threaten what I protect." The threat was delivered with such quiet certainty that even Cornelius took an involuntary step backward. These weren't the empty boasts of civilization, but the promise of someone who'd survived by strength and cunning in a harsh land. "You're threatening me." "I'm explaining reality." Kiani's obsidian eyes held no warmth. "Nalani is under my protection now. Our child is under my protection. Try to harm either, and you'll discover why my people called me Ghost Walker." The standoff might have turned violent, but Judge Mackenzie chose that moment to ride into the courtyard. The elderly Scotsman surveyed the scene with shrewd eyes, taking in the tension, the obvious sides, the barely leashed violence. "Afternoon, Mrs. Whitmore," he said pleasantly, dismounting with the careful movements of age. "I received your message about performing a ceremony. I trust these gentlemen aren't here to object." Cornelius sputtered protests about the impropriety, the illegality, the social implications. Judge Mackenzie listened with the patience of someone accustomed to fools, then cut him off with a raised hand. "Mrs. Whitmore is a woman of legal age and sound mind," he said firmly. "She has every right to marry whom she chooses. If you have legal objections, file them through proper channels. Otherwise, I suggest you leave these good people in peace." The ceremony was simple and profound. Standing in Nalani's garden with the Colorado Mountains as witness, they exchanged vows that spoke of partnership, protection, and passion that would endure beyond death itself. When Judge Mackenzie pronounced them husband and wife, Kiani's kiss sealed more than their marriage. It sealed their defiance of a world that would deny their love. As Cornelius and his men rode away in defeat, Nalani leaned against her husband's strength and felt truly free for the first time in her life. "No regrets?" Kiani asked softly. She placed her hand over their growing child and smiled. "Only that we waited so long." 5 years later, Nalani stood in the same garden where they'd been married, watching their son chase butterflies among the rose bushes. Little Chayton had inherited his father's dark eyes and his mother's stubborn streak, along with the wild beauty of both his bloodlines. "Mama, look." The 4-year-old held up a perfect specimen, his face glowing with discovery. "It's got Papa's colors, indeed." The butterfly's wings showed the deep browns and golds that matched Kiani's skin in firelight. Nalani laughed, marveling at how naturally their child moved between his dual heritage. "Very beautiful, my love. Now let it go so it can find its family." The Strong Heart Ranch had become legendary throughout the territory. Under Kiani's management and Nalani's business acumen, They'd expanded into horse breeding, established trade agreements with 3 Apache bands, and created a model of cooperation that other ranchers studied with grudging admiration. Their marriage had weathered the initial storms of prejudice through simple persistence. Those who expected the union to fail were forced to acknowledge its obvious success. Those who continued to voice disapproval found themselves increasingly isolated. As the Strong Heart's reputation for fairness and competence spread, the Henderson boy is here again, Cordelia announced from the kitchen door at 60. The housekeeper had become the fiercest defender of the unconventional family she'd come to love. Nalani smiled. Young Timothy Henderson had been visiting regularly for months, ostensibly to learn ranching techniques from Kiani. But she'd noticed how the 17-year-old's eyes followed their adopted daughter, Tala, an Apache girl they'd taken in after. Her parents died of fever. Send him to the south pasture, she called back. And make sure Tala happens to be helping with the fence repairs. Kiani emerged from the house carrying their newest addition, baby Ayana, named for his first wife. With Nalani's blessing, the infant had her mother's green eyes and her father's serious expression, and she ruled their household with the absolute authority of the beloved youngest child. Judge Mackenzie rode in this morning, Kiani said, settling beside his wife. On their favorite bench, the territorial legislature is considering statehood again, and they want me to run for the state senate. Seems they need someone who understands both Apache concerns and ranching interests. Nalani studied her husband's face. What did you tell them? That I'd discuss it with my wife. His smile was tender. Strange how far we've come from that first morning when I chopped your firewood without permission. She laughed, remembering. The magnificent savage hood appeared in her life like destiny itself. You were insufferably presumptuous. I was desperately in love. He shifted baby Ayana to one arm so he could draw Nalani close. Still I am. Their kiss was interrupted by Chayton's delighted squeal as he discovered a family of rabbits near the garden wall. The sound drew Tala and Timothy from wherever they'd been shyly flirting, and suddenly the yard was full of laughter and children and the warm chaos of family life. As sunset painted the mountains purple and gold, Nalani reflected on the choices that had brought them to this moment. She'd sacrificed social standing for authentic love, traded respectability for raw passion, abandoned the safe path for the uncertain adventure of building something new. Any regrets? Kiani asked softly, echoing his question from their wedding day. She looked at their thriving ranch, their beautiful children, their love that had only deepened with time. She thought of Cornelius, bitter and alone in his Boston mansion, still fighting legal battles he could never win. She thought of the women in town, who watched her with envy barely concealed behind their proper facades. Only one. She said finally. Kiani's eyebrows rose in surprise. What's that? Nalani's smile was pure mischief. That I didn't let you get me pregnant sooner. His laughter rang across the Colorado evening, rich and joyous and free. And somewhere in that sound was the promise of more adventures to come, more children to raise, more barriers to break in their magnificent, impossible, perfectly imperfect love. As the first stars appeared over the mountains that had witnessed their passion, Nalani knew she'd found something rarer than silver, more precious than respectability. She'd found her true home in the arms of the man who dared to offer her everything, including the gift of becoming fully, authentically herself.